r/ask Reddit. What was your scariest something's not right moment? I was walking to school in middle school and this lady with a car pulled over next to me and called me Linda. That's not my name, but was close enough. I looked up. She apologized and explained she thought I was her grandkid. Then she offered me a ride to school, except that I was already standing on the school grounds. I had a half-block walk before I needed to turn to walk into the building. When I said no, she tried to demand I get into the car. I said no thanks and took off running. It occurred to me much later that she probably had no intention of dropping me off at school. A very similar thing happened to me. Guy stopped and offered me a ride. I got in the car because he reminded me of somebody I knew, but I wasn't sure who. It was a small town, so everybody kinda knew each other. Turns out he wasn't who I thought and I also wasn't who he thought. He only offered the ride because he mistook me for his nephew. We were both tall, skinny and curly blonde hair. I actually knew the kid. Funny stuff. I was 14 at the time and even though things turned out alright, I knew I ducked out the moment I realized he was actually a stranger. A family friend and his large dog stayed with us when I was maybe 5 or 6 and the dog bolted out the gate and down the hill. I caught up with the pup and was trying so hard to drag him uphill with me and a neighbor, who had a kitty named Pepsi I remember, got me and the dog in the car and drove us up the hill. My mother tore me a new one, even though we knew them lightly. I was working on a radio system in the local water tower of a pretty remote outback town. It was a beautiful late spring day in October when I got there, but after about 2 hours the bird noises stopped. The breeze stopped. I took my equipment out of standby and flagged it as live test because I had the weirdest feeling I didn't have time to fully test it and went outside to sit in the car. About 90 seconds later there was a direct lightning strike on the tower I'd just left. It was the highest point in 200 kilometers. It was literally the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Ever. I remember reading somewhere that you can feel the static in the air before a lightning strike. Do you recall feeling your hair stand? I was in a car that got hit once. I was parked watching the storm roll in across the lake. A few seconds before the hit my hair stood on end and I got a metallic taste in my mouth. Then everything was very bright and loud. No damage to the car surprisingly. Late at night, I was sitting in my car waiting for my boyfriend to finish his shift. A guy walks past and we make eye contact. I feel this sense of danger but figure I'm overreacting. A few minutes pass and the fear won't go away. I finally decide to move my car away from the edge of the parking lot to the front of the restaurant in the customer parking area. I start up my car and just as I'm putting it into drive, the guy rushes out from behind and tries to yank open my door, pulling on it really hard. I hit the gas and he trails me for a second, then hits my window with a rock. I keep going and he throws the rock at me then runs away. I was shaking so badly I could barely steer. Pretty sure he was sneaking up on me just as I decided to start my engine. Whoa, that was a really close call. It's amazing how we can sense that something isn't right. Your instinct is what kept animals alive from danger for millions of years. It is still incredible how spot on it is. I planned to visit my dad in the afternoon. Called him in the morning to ask if he needed anything because I was about to go to the store anyway and could easily pick up some things for him. He didn't answer. A little weird for him but not too uncommon. But I had that thought in the back of my head. So I tried again like 30 minutes later. Again, nothing. Neither landline or mobile. So I decided to drive over there early and check. Can't really explain it but I just knew that something had happened. Found him dead in his house. He fell and cracked his head open. To this day I don't actually know what was worse, finding him like this or the 30-minute long drive where the feeling grew that I was going to walk into something like that. Not too similar but the same eerie feeling with my dad. All day felt weird, wrong. My mother even texted me while I was at work saying something felt bad. My sister texted my mom earlier saying something was odd. A few hours later my mom found my dad dead. He died in his sleep from heart issues. Coincidentally the cat threw up on my mom's stuff which she never does, we think. At the time he actually passed the way the timeline plays out. Similar story with my mom. She died in her sleep at least. But when she didn't answer within the hour about a question regarding babysitting my daughter, I knew she was at best in a bad way. Luckily, since she had her doors locked and her trolley bar down, I couldn't get in, and it was the police and firefighters who had to tell me. I'm glad I didn't see her body. That drive is weird. I was living about 5 hours away from my parents and spent Easter with them. The plan was to take Monday off work and drive back that day, but for some reason, I decided to go back on Sunday night. Woke up about 3 to a weird noise and hit the touch lamp next to my bed. It made a loud popping sound and turned off. Thinking, something isn't right here. I got up and grabbed the bedroom door handle. It was so hot that I immediately pulled my hand back. As it turned out, my entire apartment was in flames. My living room caught fire from a faulty electric outlet and it spread to the dining room by the time I got up. The only ways out were through the living room to the front door or through the dining room and kitchen to the back door. I used whatever strength I had to shove my headboard away from the window, broke the window out with my glass, and just screamed. My landlord was letting a guy illegally live in a storage room. He heard me and ran right down the block to the fire station. They actually got me through the window and then put out the fire. I was hours away from my family, had no money or it, lost my cell phone and car keys in the fire, and it was only like 4 am. I ended up losing pretty much everything. My neighbor was nice enough to let me shower at her place and give me some clothes until my parents made the drive. If you told me a man my landlord was letting illegally live in a storage room appeared in a story in this thread, I would not have guessed he was gonna be the hero. Sorry you went through that. Name one superhero that didn't do something illegal. It wasn't me that noticed something's not right. Once a woman came up to me on a train that I had gotten on and said, "I just wanted you to know that man there is following you," and he followed me in a quiet way. When I changed trains and I ended up asking a cop to walk me home. It was one of the creepiest experiences of my life. In hindsight, I shouldn't even have gone home. I'm pretty sure he stopped following me when I spoke with the police officer, but still. So for the future, if someone is following, in a car or otherwise, go straight to a police station. You can of course find ways to prove they are following you, taking 3 turns to go around the block etc. But the best you can do is get some proof of who it is. Covert selfie with them in it or license plate. You can also go to a place where you know there are surveillance cameras beforehand, then leave. However, all these steps won't guarantee your safety like going to the cops. So you have to trust your gut and make a judgment call. Solid advice. Very good advice. Unfortunately, the cop that walked me home found my social media later and asked me out. It wasn't bad or anything, he didn't bother me again after I said no, but it still left a sour taste in my mouth. Better than being followed home by a weirdo. I got home from work and as soon as I stepped out of my car something felt off. My upstairs neighbor left his dog out, which wasn't super uncommon, but she was acting strange, which just added to my weird intuition. Normally she's super excited to greet you, but this time she just sat by his door. About 20 minutes pass and I can't shake the feeling. I decide to go to his door and see if he wants to come down for a drink. As I approach, I notice his dog made it inside, but now she's barking non-stop. I knock until I'm pounding on his door. I jiggle the handle and it's locked. I run down and through my house to a back stairwell that connects our residences. I open the door to his apartment and he's overdosing on Percocet, convulsing on the ground, struggling to breathe. M said if they had been called 10 minutes later he might not have survived. Edit. Didn't think this would get much attention. So here's a bonus story. I moved into the house where this happened about 2 years ago. In the same upstairs residence there was an older gentleman who lived there before my buddy and his dog. Roughly 3 weeks after moving in I stopped seeing my elderly neighbor. He was a bit of a homebody, didn't have internet or even a smartphone. Very simple guy who just enjoyed the company of some scotch and his blues records. Weeks go by and I notice he hasn't been playing his records and it's been awfully quiet. But I didn't think much of this because I wasn't well acquainted with the guy, so I didn't really know his schedule habits. Around week 3 or 4, this foul stench starts to creep throughout my home. I light candles. I hose my house with Febreze to no avail. One day I come home and the smell is unbearable. And then it hits me. This is the smell of a dead body. I call my landlord, who comes over in a hurry. As soon as he is introduced to the smell he goes white. We rush to his front door, which he unlocks considering this to be extreme circumstances, and sure enough my former neighbor is dead, rotting on the floor. He had been there for so long his blood had soaked into the floor and was seeping into my bathroom ceiling. You could see it inside the light fixtures. Dogs know when things aren't right. My dog was the one who alerted me to my detached garage being on fire. He also catches onto arguments in the neighborhood and gets upset if things start to escalate, which usually cues me to call 911, and that has gotten abusers arrested and prevented major vandalism sprees. Every time my dog is acting off I pay very close attention, because usually he's right. That's so cool. Good dog. I was driving past a small park close to my home when I noticed two older couples on the sidewalk looking into the park. The women seemed distraught and the men were trying to calm them down from the looks of things. I slowed down a bit and for a second I debated stopping to see if everything was alright, but decided against it and kept on driving. The following day I found out a young person from the area had hanged themselves from a tree in the park, and I assume those two elderly couples were the unfortunate ones to make the discovery. Or they did it and you old bean next. Look, Richard. Another victim approaches. Damn it, Linda. You scared him away. My dad had just passed from a long battle with cancer, and towards the end my mom had been acting odd. She hadn't been caring for him towards the end. I ended up leaving work to do so, and she didn't really seem to be mourning him, and they had had a reasonably good relationship. A couple of days after he passed, I was going through his stuff and I noticed it was 10 AM and my mom wasn't up. I let her be. 11, 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock. Finally I was starting to think maybe something was up. She had never stayed in bed that late ever. So I opened her door. I found her on all fours with her chest on a stool, kneeling in a fairly large pile of urine and feces. I'm not sure how she got on the floor. I feel like I would have heard her fall. After I got her cleaned up and stuff, I asked her what the deal was, and she told me she didn't have the strength to get up, nor the presence of mind to yell for help. Ended up taking her to the ER, and that was the day I figured out I wouldn't be going back to work, because I was going to spend the next few years taking care of my now terminally ill mother. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. Thank you for those kind words. They made me feel happier today. I suppose I should have added that she had a brain tumor, and she didn't last a few years. I try not to remember the exact dates because I don't need to be sad every year around a certain time period, but I believe she hung on for around 9 months after that. I always thought the best thing I ever did as a human was to take care of my parents when they got sick. They both desperately wanted to die at home and not in a hospital. Nothing against hospitals. I was home alone and someone rang my bell door. It was dark and I could see a person, but I was unable to see his face, only like a shadow. I didn't open the door because he never answered, so I went back to playing. However, my dog would look straight at the door like he knew something was not right. After like 2 hours my parents arrived and told me there are 2 police cars on our street. Apparently, that person was a burglar and he knocked out one of my neighbors and stole from his house. This happened 2 years ago, but I still feel unsafe because I am probably the only one that was able to see his face. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.